Don't look now, but the Florida Gators 2025 recruiting class, it's getting there.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free for listening to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Tuesday. I am Brandon Olson. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI.com. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. And the Florida Gators 2025 recruiting class has gotten considerably better in recent days because on Sunday, you added quarterback Tramell Jones, who on three is now your fourth highest rated player in the class. And then yesterday, you added defensive lineman Stephon Shivers, who's more toward the middle of the class there. He's a 3-star everywhere except the ESPN. He's a 4-star, was previously committed to Georgia, then decommitted last week or 2 weeks ago, maybe 10-ish days, if I'm not mistaken, and then was deciding between Florida, Vanderbilt. I believe he also had USC and Oregon in his Final Four. Committed to Florida, ultimately giant human being, 6'4", 6'5", 380, 385, just a massive human being there. But this is a class that is now ranked 27th in the country on three, now ranked 31st in the country on 24/7, if I'm not mistaken. I forgot where the class was on three just a couple weeks ago, but just before these commitments on 24/7, they were 51st in the class. So you've climbed 20 spots in the past 48 hours. That's progress. And I know that, Stephon Shivers is a 3-star almost across the board, and that there's people that are going to look at that and be not too hyped about it. And Tramell Jones is a 3-star with 2 of the recruiting sites and then a 4-star with the other 2. I don't care too much about that because I know that, there's bigger names available, and I know that there's more impactful names in terms of recruiting your rankings, but I don't get too worked up about stuff like that because it's progress. And I feel like I've always said, as long as there's progress being made, I won't be too bashful, which, by the way, I'm sorry if at some point I say something that's going to bother someone, because I know yesterday's episode, I got one comment that was like, "You're so negative. How are you always negative? I can't even watch this." And 10 minutes later, there's like, "How are you being so positive and optimistic about this?" So clearly, never going to please everyone. And my apology is very not sincere. But this Florida Gators recruiting class right now, at the top, you've got Vernell Brown III, who pretty much since he committed has been the highest ranked kid in this class, just teetering on being a 5-star. Composite-wise, he's right outside. He's number 39. There's 32 5-stars. Ben Hanks Jr., another consensus 4-star. Jalen Wiggins, consensus 4-star. Tramell Jones, not consensus 4-star, but again, he's a 4-star by the composite. Nashawn Montgomery is a 4-star by the composite. Waltez Clark is a 4-star by the composite. Tayshawn Gelsey is a 4-star by the composite. I realize I haven't said their positions. Tramell Jones, QB. Nashawn Montgomery, wide receiver. Waltez Clark, running back. Tayshawn Gelsey, tight end / wide receiver. Stephon Shivers, defensive lineman, who just committed yesterday. Jeremiah McLeod, a defensive lineman that is now ranked just below Stephon Shivers. Shivers is ranked 449. Jeremiah McLeod is ranked 488. So in terms of being the same position, or they're both on the defensive line. They're not truly the same position, but they're right there. Jeremiah McLeod, much more of a natural 3-tech. I look at him playing a type of role that like a Tyreek Sapp plays more so than Stephon Shivers, who's more of I think he'll wind up being more of a pure nose tackle, but I think that they're anticipating with an SEC strength conditioning program, being that he's listed as 6'4.5", 380. I think their expectation is that with a strength and conditioning program, he'll lose a bit of weight, and so he'll probably sink down, and they'll be able to play him as more of a nose tackle and 3-tech, which is what they've said they want to use him as. We'll see if that really works out that way, but the addition is one that I said this yesterday for basically the whole damn live show. We've been live for, I think, 25 minutes after Stephon Shivers committed, and we go live for every commitment that we can go live for, that Gerald Chapman has done an incredible job this year. He's one of the few coaches on the staff that I can see, and I'm like, I'm not even going to question what he's doing, because he's clearly really freaking good at what he does. So I'm not even going to question it like that. So Stephon Shivers, great. His 2023 film was pretty damn good, which I mentioned this yesterday. It's against a lesser competition in Tennessee. 2024 film, whenever it comes out, will be against higher competition. But 2023 film, you cut it on, and the first play, he's lined up as a running back in the I form, and he runs like a 70-yard touchdown. It's crazy. And obviously, I refuse to believe he was 380 at that time, but big dude still. Behind the 2D linemen, you've got Micah Jones, a consensus 3-star. Then you've got Miles Johnson, who's a 3-star everywhere except ESPN has him as a 4-star. ESPN has him as the 11th best linebacker in the country, which is an interesting tidbit compared to On3 has him as their 92nd overall by just their rankings. So ESPN way higher on him than others. Chad Gasper, running back out of Katy, Texas. Great pass catching back. Plays a lot of pistol set as it is. Plays a very spread out offense down there. That's great. He's a consensus 3-star. Evan Knoll, the kicker, and Hayden Craig, the punter, are the next two out there. They're consensus 3 stars, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't think ESPN or Rivals really do the kicker rankings. But Evan Knoll is a top-ranked kicker on 3 and 24/7. And I believe by Cole's kicking camp, he's a top 3 kicker in the country, if I'm not mistaken. So looking at that class, like, I think that there's one very notable omission on the offensive line because there's none yet. But you've got 2 tight ends, at least for now. You've got 2 running backs. You've got 2 receivers right now, and you're in the mix for quite a few. We'll talk about those in the next segment when we talk about the offensive targets. But overall, you've got guys at basically every position that you need to get, except the offensive line, which you desperately need to get, which, again, we'll talk about those in the next segment. But looking at receiver, Nashawn Montgomery, he's taken, I think, 3 visits this year to Alabama. Alabama needs receiver talent for the future. And by the future, I do mean as early as 2025, there's playing time available at receiver at Alabama. So I think when you look at Nashawn Montgomery and he's kind of peaking elsewhere, he was a kid that I was told, hey, early September-ish when the Billy Napier fired stuff started happening, they were like, hey, he's going to remain committed until Billy gets fired, and then he's going to decommit and flip. But to this point, obviously, Billy not getting fired, I do think that it might have gotten to the point where he was so intent on leaving and was just waiting for Billy to get fired that he may be intent on flipping to Alabama. So that's a very real risk, I believe. And then Tayshawn Gelsey is another one at tight end. He's the Amir Jackson of this class for Florida. He's the receiving tight end. He's looked at as someone who, by the way, was a big riser after he committed to Florida. He was not a 4-star when he committed to Florida, but he's looking at Florida State because Florida State is like, hey, you can come play receiver. I don't know who's going to throw you the ball, but you can come play receiver, where he plays receiver right now in high school. He's going to play tight end for Florida. But yeah, he plays receiver right now at Riverside. And from what I've been told, he's being told, hey, you can play receiver at Florida State. And so that's a real sign. That's just a decision where I don't think it's necessarily being, not that I like to give it an excuse or anything, but I feel like that's one of those things where it's like, well, we want to use you at tight end. We value you at tight end. They value you at receiver. Go to which spot you want to play and which spot you think is going to put you in a better position. But this is how we value you. We will look at the offensive targets that aren't committed to Florida when we get back next on Locked On Gators. What's up, Locked On Gators listeners, Florida Gators fans? You need to download the Roy app, and you have heard us talk about Roy this season and how they are revolutionizing the NIL industry. Roy allows you, the fan, to have a say in who gets the NIL money. And here's what I absolutely love about Roy. You get your money back if that player does not do whatever they're supposed to do, if they don't hold up their end of the bargain, or if they transfer. So Roy is helping us keep teams intact, and it's actually good for the game long term, right? We are going to have our Locked On Gators spotlight player this week, and it's Caleb Banks. 7 pressures, which is a career high, dominant performance against LSU, wrecked stuff, and my favorite part about it, damn near every snap you see Caleb Banks in the backfield, and he's walking Garrett Nussmeier back to the huddle. He's like, hey, don't worry, little buddy. I'll take you back to the huddle. You are my son after all, so I'll take you back. And so Caleb Banks, you are the Roy Player of the Week for Locked On Gators. We're going to throw some money into his account on Roy. Every contribution counts, 10, 20 bucks, whatever it is. Download the Roy app or go to joinroy.com today. Use promo code Locked On. Every athlete from every team is there. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for full terms. Roy, support the players, and you can change the game. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite team play even easier. And if you want to catch the Florida Gators' last home game of the year, where they can reach bowl eligibility by beating Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss and Princely Umar, and you can be in person for that. You can with Game Time. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time, baby. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free to listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And we're going to talk about the offensive targets for Florida. We're really talking about receivers and offensive line here, the main areas where you still need to target players here. There was, depending on where you look at it, 4-star or 5-star receiver in Jaime French, and 5-star, I believe 5-star plus, which means 5-star by every recruiting service, Dallas Wilson. The top targets at receiver right now, they're on campus this past week. From what I've been told, there is a better chance to land Dallas Wilson, who, by the way, a 5-star receiver out of Tampa Bay Tech. He is currently committed to Oregon. There's a better chance to land him and keep him than there is a chance to get Jaime French, who is a Texas commit right now. Again, Jaime French is a 4 or 5-star, depending on where it looks, but a Texas commit that is currently at Mandarin, which if you're connecting the dots, if you watched the live show on Sunday, Mandarin is where Florida Gators' new quarterback, Tramell Jones, is from. So his quarterback, they're both at Mandarin in Jacksonville. Jaime French is a Texas commit. Again, I was told don't be optimistic about Jaime French. That's just what was passed down to me, was that don't be too optimistic about Jaime French. There is a better chance of landing Dallas Wilson. That's not to say that there's a good chance of landing Dallas Wilson. I want to make that one clear. But from what I was told, there's a better chance with Dallas Wilson. And so I do think that the coaching staff is going to push more emphasis on flipping Dallas from Oregon, where, again, you get to keep a kid in state. And I do think that, now we said this when Dallas Wilson committed to Oregon. We said this with, I believe it was Brian Smith. It's hard to keep a commitment cross country for as long as Dallas is committed to Oregon. Like, it's hard to keep a commitment cross country diagonally. It's not just cross country, the South or the North. It's both. It's tough to keep a commitment that way. Like, it's not like he's in, USC where it's like, yeah, it's far, but it's on the bottom. It's horizontal going. Nope. This is big time diagonal. It's tough to keep that. And so Dallas Wilson, I think there's a better chance there. But there are two, I don't want to say non-priority receivers, but I do think that they're the tier behind Jaime French and Dallas Wilson in terms of priority there. The two guys that I'm keeping an eye on are, ironically, both committed to Arizona, and they're both 3-star receivers. One, Muiz Tunkara, who I'm so sorry if I'm butchering that name, but Muiz Tunkara is from Texas and committed to Arizona right now. And I don't really believe that there's a lot of interest here, but I am going to keep monitoring this kid in Isaiah Mizell, who, yes, Aiden Mizell's little brother. Aiden Mizell's little brother Isaiah does have that Mizell family speed. I don't know if he gets the offer. I do think that if he gets an offer, then he would likely come to Florida. I don't know if he gets the committable offer. I also don't know if Moise Tunkara is going to get the committable offer, but I do believe that there's legitimate interest, and I think he's the higher priority of the two. I believe there's legitimate interest, and Moise Tunkara is a 6'3", 6'4", depending on where you look, track athlete. I'm cool with it. That's just a kid that you swing on, especially if you're losing Joshua Moore, who was your tall, fast guy. So you lose him, go get Moise, call it a day. Texas football players, great state to get kids from. On the offensive line, feel really confident about landing interior offensive lineman Daniel Pierre-Louis, who is a 3-star, currently committed to Florida State. That one, I mean, that he could be committed by the time this episode comes out in a couple hours. Like, that's a couple hours from the time I'm recording this. He could be committed, and it wouldn't shock me. Daniel Pierre-Louis is someone that I do think is going to flip to Florida from Florida State and could go at any moment at this point. Daniel Pierre-Louis is, again, like I said, Florida State commit, as is Solomon Thomas, offensive line committee. He's a 4 or 5-star, depending on where you look. But Florida State did a thing about a week ago. Sorry, that was inappropriate. After they fired offensive coordinator / offensive lineman Alex Atkins. And when you fire a position coach who is also a coordinator, non-play calling coordinator, but still a coordinator, that matters with recruiting. So it's pretty much open season on the Florida State offensive line recruiting class. And, which, by the way, Florida has multiple times taken Florida State commits, especially on the offensive line. Rod Kearney, probably the most notable one. Solomon Thomas has openly said, like, hey, if you're not talking business, then we're not talking. And I know that a lot of just college football fans hate that. However, my counterpoint to it is that Solomon Thomas has basically said no coach is going to be able to replicate the relationship that I had with Alex Atkins. And so, since I don't have the relationship, because there's just not enough time to build that relationship. So he's like, since I can't get that relationship, I need good offensive line coach. And if you're not talking business, then we're not talking. Since, again, like that, basically the way that I view it was that relationship part was robbed. That relationship that we've had for a long time has been robbed from me. And so I know I can't replace that relationship. So you know what? I'm going to go get my money and I'm going to go put in work elsewhere. And so that's how I kind of viewed Solomon Thomas's approach. Tavares Dice, a 4-star offensive lineman, longtime Auburn commit. This has been just a flip war that Florida and Auburn have been in. Florida fell out of it for a while, but both teams have at least rough starts to the season. Auburn, congratulations on beating ULM, but they've had a rough year as well, especially offensively. He visited for the Florida game, or for the LSU game. So Florida and Auburn still battling for Tavares Dice, still a realistic chance there. Then there's Jahari Medlock, who's a 3-star offensive lineman as well. I will say he's one that's harder to get a true feel for as we just get this late in the cycle. And we're talking about a kid that is from Georgia, committed to Cincinnati. It's tough to get the true gauge for it, but I will say this. Reading the tea leaves of his recruitment so far and who he's talking to, is, by the way, Jonathan DeCoster is listed as his primary recruiter, and I believe Jonathan DeCoster is also listed as Daniel Pierre-Louis's primary recruiter, at least on 24/7. But when we look at Jahari Medlock has recently gotten all this interest. He got his first offer from Florida in September. So he got offered in September. He visited officially last month, and then he's supposed to be back on campus this weekend for the Ole Miss game. That's a good sign this late in the game to have that much traction for a kid when we were 2 weeks basically from signing it. So that's a good sign there. We are going to flip to the defensive side of the ball when we get back with Locked On Gators. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, right? But I'm not going to go crawling through a bed of hot coals watching Florida State at Charleston Southern game. Horrible. Just to save a few bucks. In fact, I'm saving money by not watching that game on ACC Network Extra. Huh? No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, we called them on it, right? And it turns out it's really easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time that you spend on hold waiting to break up with your old provider. Some breakups are fun. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. $45 upfront payment required, which is the equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Looking at the defensive side of the ball for the Florida Gators 2025 targets, there's not a lot, okay? And I do believe that part of that is I think Florida is going to go more portal heavy on the defensive side of the ball. And so that's why I look at it and I'm like, all right, well, there's not a ton of action on the defensive side right now. However, we could also talk about how you have multiple defensive linemen committed, edge rusher, linebacker, DB, like you've got guys. It's just a matter, and there is the potential of bringing in some 2026 kids that are committed to your class and reclassifying them. But again, I think it's more so they're going to go more portal approach there. But on the defensive line, Joseph Mbatchou, one-time Florida commit, decommitted, has hung around with Florida, and we saw this last year in the defensive line as well. Mekhi Boyero, he committed to Florida, decommitted from Florida, and then kind of bounced around a little bit as far as taking visits and whatnot, and then committed back to Florida. So we've seen this happen before. It's not a completely new thing. We saw it happen last year with Florida. I think Joseph Mbatchou winds up at one of 3 places: Florida, Auburn, Texas. Okay. I do think that Florida has the relationship advantage there. Florida, don't forget, was the first Power 4 school to really target him like that. Florida was the first SEC program to offer him. He committed to Florida, and this is all when he was unranked. And had never played football before. He's a soccer player that was moving to the D-line. And Florida took a shot on him with a committable offer. I think if you look at this as a relationship standpoint, Florida's got the advantage. It's just about finishing it. So I do think that it's, very realistic. Florida can land Joseph Mbatchou once again. Linebacker. I don't know how much of a priority linebacker is going to be for the Florida Gators right now, especially when you look at just their roster as far as who's playing. You've got 2 true freshmen right now, which, by the way, that makes it harder to recruit that position. You got 2 true freshmen playing linebacker right now in Miles Graham and Aaron Childs. Again, both legitimately playing like meaningful snaps at this point. Earlier in the year, Childs was basically an edge rusher. Miles was playing a couple of snaps. Now they're both playing meaningful snaps at inside linebacker. That matters, having them both available. You've got Pup Howard back for at least 1 more year. You've got maybe Shamar James back. Would not shock. I know that a lot of people going into this year were talking about Shamar James. Like he could be late first, early second round pick. He's got a lot of athletic traits. He's got all this. He does. But his film this year wasn't great so far. LSU game, just wrecked, absolutely. But so far, we've yet to see the rest. Deuce Spurlock II, transferred over from Michigan to Florida. Would not shock me if he wound up leaving. I don't remember seeing him play a single meaningful snap. So Deuce Spurlock leaving would not shock me. You've got Jaden Robinson, who, that kid's playing wild football as a true sophomore. Like his developmental jump has been incredible to see, because he's someone that as a true freshman last year was not that impressive. Like he was a safety that played linebacker in high school, moved around a lot and made a lot of plays. And when you watched him play as a true freshman in 2023, he looked like that. And then 2024 comes around and he's playing damn good football. And there's a legitimate argument that he's your second best linebacker on the team. So if I'm a linebacker externally, I'm like, all right, well, they've got their top 4 rotation. Yeah, they might lose Shamar. Yeah, RJ Moten, I believe, has to go. Yeah, Derek Wingo has to go. They're going to lose guys, but I don't know how much playing time is available early. They've got Miles Johnson already committed. I don't know how much of a priority linebackers are going to be in the high school class. I do think linebackers is a spot where they look at the portal. I think that they look for a kid or a guy who can step in right away, play meaningful snaps, probably off the bench, but play meaningful snaps as a linebacker, contribute on special teams, and has experience playing in a similar defensive system to what Florida's run. And I think they look at that and they go, all right, well, I could pop in there. But it wouldn't shock me. Like, if I'm Florida, I'm at least going to spin the block on 4 stars that maybe they're interested. Like, let's say you land Daniel Pierre-Louis, the offensive lineman. Maybe you go, hey, Ty Jackson, any interest? Because Ty Jackson is currently committed to USC, but goes to Seminole Ridge, which is the same school that Daniel Pierre-Louis goes to. So maybe you go, hey, Ty, like, you want to join Daniel Pierre-Louis and the Florida Gators instead of going to USC, where they have not looked good at all this year? Maybe. Or Tavion Wallace, who is committed to Arkansas right now. Again, a 4-star. Florida was in on it. Especially if they see staff changes coming down the line. Like, no clue what's going to happen with Sam Pittman. But if I'm Billy, if you can win these final 2 games, if I'm Billy, I'm going to everybody like a Tavion Wallace. And I'm going to go, hey, Sam's going to get fired. Sam wins 1 game a year that gets him to keep his job. We were that game in 2023. Tennessee was that game in 2024. He wins 1 game a year to keep his job. You want to be with the team that's 1 win a year to keep your job? Mm-mm. You want to come here with us, where we came back from the brink of buyout death there. You want to come play with us and look at how good our linebackers are playing. I'm doing that with the blue chip kids, the really good kids. Looking at the defensive backfield, that's a spot where, again, I think Florida goes portal heavy, especially when you look at a guy like Triquez Bridges, who was a great portal addition. Granted, Florida has not had everybody work out in the portal, but you look at next year's roster, you've got Sharif Denson, and this is, again, assuming everybody comes back, Sharif Denson, Jakeem Jackson, Teddy Foster, Aaron Gates, Jordan Castell, Bryce Thornton, Josiah Davis, Cormani McLean, Jameer Grimsley, Dijon Johnson, Devin Moore, Gregory Smith, all coming back. There's walk-on depth. There's other depth, but like, those are all guys that we look at and we say, well, they should be contributing next year. Assuming all those guys are back, that should be your whole defensive backfield. That's when you go, all right, well, I think, again, portal heavy, maybe in the safety spot specifically. I know that Billy Napier mentioned earlier this week that they haven't really discussed Asa Turner potentially taking a medical red shirt. I don't know if that means he'd be back if he took a medical red shirt, or if he'd medically red shirt and hit the portal. Not sure. But DB in high school, I keep coming back to 2 names. One, Caleb Singleton, one-time Florida target, committed to Rutgers, has decommitted since then. Florida's very much in the mix for him. He was on campus versus LSU, and I love his tape. And if I'm him, I'm committing the moment that they tell me I really can, because I look at him as more of a star, and so I look at Aaron Gates and Sharif Denson, and if I'm Caleb Singleton, I go, well, they're both going to be in year 3, which means that they've got at most 2 years, assuming they stay healthy, 2 years left, which means I'll be able to rotate in behind them and contribute behind them. And they're playing really good football. So I'd look at them and I'd say, all right, I'm going. So Caleb Singleton is one that I look at. I was a huge fan of his film. Loved his film. And then there's Chris McCorkle, who is a corner recruit that Florida has not been pushing for at all. But I have always said, and I will stick with this, if UF wants to push for him, like if UF wants to get Chris McCorkle, I think UF can get Chris McCorkle. He's a Cardinal Mooney kid out of Sarasota. His teammates with Teddy Foster. He's 6'1", 175, currently committed to Kansas. 3-star recruit. But I look at him and I'm like, all right, If Florida wants him, they can get him. I don't think it's even tough. If they want to be aggressive the week before signing day, I think they can do that and still land his commitment. So Chris McCorkle is a name that I always just like keep in the back of my mind. Not a name that I'm like, oh yeah, Florida needs to go get him. But I keep him in the back of my mind always. And I think Florida knows that they've got him on the back burner. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever in the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Hayden Hansen will join us for Locked On Gators. I'm Brandon Olson. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I'll see you all next time.